welcome once again to the Sage. What a day. What a show. If I had ever dreamed in this my journey with you as the Sage of a perfect show, a show that would capture all the things that are intrinsically important to me, this would have been the show. Why? But before that, I am Dr. Nkechi, your Sage, your host on this show. Why? Why am I so touched? Why am I so passionate? We're going to discuss an issue today that for a large part of my life as a person, I have considered to be the most important things in terms of issues. Women empowerment, gender issues concerning women, young girls, young boys, safe motherhood. No woman should die giving birth, that ultimate service. Youth empowerment, reproductive health and reproductive rights. Nothing in my mind can be more important. It is a mandate which it isn't just that I have heard about it, I have lived it for almost 20 years. Preached it, designed programs, traveled across the world. And during those years, I used to proudly say there could be no better mandate. And indeed, there still is no better mandate. And what is the second reason? On set with me today is the absolutely perfect person to discuss these issues with us. First, because she, at this point in time in history, is at the helm of affairs for the great organization that handles these issues. But also because she's a remarkable, remarkable human being. I am so proud to admit that she's been a friend of mine for a long time. A woman with remarkable attributes, great leadership qualities. I could go on and on. And so, we promised you a wow of a show. Join me as an excitement, feeling specially privileged. I introduce you to my guests today, to no less than Dr. Natalia Kanem, the Executive Director of Unfpa and Under Secretary General. Dr. Kanem, you're welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Nkechi. After that introduction, I just don't know what to say.
I've just started. See me
Thank
open
you.
my iPad. For you to get somebody like Dr. Kanem on set, it would be gross injustice not to give her the honor that is hers. Dr. Natalia Kanem is the United Nations Under Secretary General and the Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, Unfpa. She was appointed Unfpa's Executive Director by the United Nations Secretary General in 2017. Dr. Kanem joined the UN in 2014 as the Unfpa country representative in the United Republic of Tanzania. And in 2016, she was named the Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director programs in UNFPA. Dr. Kanem has more than 30 years of strategic leadership experience in the fields of preventive medicine, public and reproductive health, social justice, and philanthropy. She started her research careers with the Johns Hopkins and Columbia University School of Medicine and Public Health. Previously, she served as the founding president of Elmer Philanthropies Incorporated and as senior associate of the Lloyd Best Institute of the West Indies. At the Ford Foundation, from 1992 to 2004, she funded pioneering work on women's reproductive health and human rights, serving first in West Africa, and I'm proud to say in Nigeria
Yes.
for quite a bit of time, and eventually as the Deputy Vice President for Peace and Social Justice programs in Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and North America. She holds a medical degree from Columbia University in New York and a master's degree in public health with specializations in epidemiology and preventive medicine from the University of Washington in Seattle. She is a magna cum laude graduate of Harvard College in History and Science. In 2019, Dr. Kanem presided over the Nairobi Summit on ICPD at 25. I was there.
Yes.
She marked the 25th anniversary of the International Conference on Population and Development. She is a well-recognized and powerful advocate for the rights and choices of women and girls. And she's a key influencer and thought leader in the formulation of global policies on sexual and reproductive health and rights in this sustainable development era. She's been listed as one of the top 100 on gender equality. Dr. Kanem is the 5th executive director of UNFPA since the fund was founded in 1969. And I am privileged to say that I did indeed serve under 4 of those 5 executive directors.
Yes.
Dr. Natalia Kanem, welcome to the Sage.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Nkechi. And you are a sage in these matters, so I'm really happy to be here.
It's such a pleasure. I feel as if I won the pool. I won the lottery. Because it's not often that somebody with your schedule and your brilliance, if you don't mind my saying so, can make out time to discuss. So we're going to make the most of it. Bear with me.
Very good.
Bear with me.
Good.
Bear with us. Our audience are sitting on this edge of their chairs, waiting to hear. Before I open up and leave you to talk, which is why you're here, let me just say that there was so much I thought we could discuss with you. So I decided to be, good and chose just 4. I felt we will start with asking you about that global, wonderful mandate that is UNFPA's. And then we will go on to ask you, what does it take to be an effective executive director? Then we will go into Nigeria. I know you love us.
Yes, I do.
And so your thoughts, your work in Nigeria, and your hopes for Nigeria. And then we will end with what many of my viewers, I'm sure, will be dying to hear. How on earth did you get to where you are? What did it take to do it? So you see, it's not a lot. But let me start with that mandate that I had talked about. That is so wonderful. Tell us about the UNFPA mandate. What is it?
UNFPA And the people of UNFPA, there are about 5,000 of us spread out across the world in over 150 locations. UNFPA represents the best of the United Nations when we think about the job that we have to do by 2030. To leave no one behind means paying attention to those who otherwise would be ignored, would be marginalized. So when UNFPA stood up to say our mission, and you mentioned part of it, that every childbirth be safe, that every pregnancy is wanted and intended, and that young people's potential be fulfilled.
Absolutely.
These are the hopes and dreams of every Nigerian, every African, everywhere in the world. People are looking for that safe harbor so that an adolescent girl is well prepared before she becomes a mother, so that that mother survives and in fact is given every support so that she can successfully get through the pregnancy, breastfeed the newborn, and the joy and the happiness of the family when that continuity of life is respected and the path is well prepared. There's just, I mean, your family is the seat of where people move from. And in order to do that, young people's potential absolutely has to be nurtured. No one kind of springs up with everything in front of them. And that guidance comes from the family, it comes from the community, but it also comes from within. The young person has to have that confidence. So we think every day about how do we do that? How do we instill that understanding so that rather than a path of ignorance and treachery and the young person feeling isolated, instead you have harmony, you have collaboration, and certainly you have a good education for that girl child so that she can blossom into her womanhood and move forward with a purpose.
Absolutely.
So it is a fantastic mandate for our organization.
It is. It is, because you've said it all. That young girl, that woman, that mother, in the end is indeed the heart of this family, of the society.
That's right. And what I find really interesting, especially in an era where everything is changing. We had COVID, which now disrupted plans. We've had a season of looking at climate issues. So important. I remember when I came here originally, the hugeness of Lake Chad, which is shrinking. Every day it gets smaller and smaller. This has impact on people's livelihoods, on migration patterns, and also the prospects of young people are changing. Yes, there's a lot of positivity with internet, et cetera, but many, many, many young people can't afford it. They don't really have internet on their phone, if they have a phone. So I think we have to be very deliberate in saying that preparation is not a wish. We have to put that, the stones in place so that there are stepping stones to a brighter future. And ultimately, that potential is huge. But if it's lying fallow, if the field is not plowed, then basically you've really wasted that potential. I'm glad that at this moment, African Union, for example, is talking about things like population dynamics, youth investment and youth employment, and also making it clear that women have the right to plan the size of their family. And even in a place like Niger, I'm here with my team, and Argentina Matavel, who leads our West Africa program, just this week was telling me about a huge success in Niger, where head of state, backed fully by the traditional chiefs, the chef traditionnel.
Yeah.
So tradition and culture have come together to say that every girl must be educated. And I'm talking about through secondary school, very protective of her life prospects, not just economically, but so much protection, including against gender-based violence, which is so prevalent in our region, like it is everywhere in the world. The other success there is that the traditional chiefs are backing contraception, family planning, the right of women to choose. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to turn the tables on you because of your wealth of experience and ask you, how is it that the women of Nigeria are going to be allowed to express that right to choose? And what do you see as coming on the horizon vis-a-vis the logistics of delivering in a village? Yes, if you're in a city, even there it can be difficult. But are we forgetting about our sisters in the hinterlands who also want to be able to choose the size of their family?
This is the first time it's been done on the Sage.
I love it.
You see, I knew I was in trouble. But what a great question. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to step aside and be part, in a way, part of that mandate that I think is so wonderful. For me, since retirement indeed, and coming back to Nigeria, I have thought about that question. And for me, I thought part of the answer, or perhaps a significant part of the answer, is concrete effort to economically empower the young women themselves. And that is indeed why C4C exists, Conversations for Change. We have found with so many cultural practices in Africa and many other countries in the world that actually when the woman is empowered, when the girl is empowered, they change those norms. Mm. They recognize their own need and they reach out to the last mile. And we think that in Africa, when we raise a significant number of young women, particularly, who have economic empowerment, who have enough money and funds and resources to make their decisions, that the change we're looking for will come.
Well, you know, I am a big believer in making sure that every human being understands and knows and claims their rights. But as the female of the species, typically we're inhibited. We're thinking about everyone else's good. The last thing you want is to be accused of being selfish, so you're going to eat the last, you're going to be the last in line for so much that life has to offer, which is a noble thing. I think it's good to be generous and to share. But the difficulty arises when, you know, the pregnant woman is sacrificing her nutrition and therefore the nutrition of her newborn in order to adapt to gender norms which don't serve the purpose. They may have long ago, but they no longer do. And I've been challenged from issues, for example, of what we've termed bodily autonomy. It means the right to say, my body is my own. Even by devoted fathers who have cautioned me and said, well, executive director, does the body of the girl really belong to her, or does she belong to the family? And the right to one's own body is enshrined in so many human rights declarations over the course of time. But when gender comes into the picture, it shifts. And the expectation is that women will take the back seat. Sometimes as women, we ourselves expect that we should take the back seat. So to change that mindset among young women, we also need allies of young men. And that's something which I believe you've said over the years. And I think the new generation has been a bit more successful in terms of airing these issues. But for me, the success will come when that rate of gender-based violence goes down. And as you know, tomorrow we start the 16 days leading up to the Human Rights Day on against gender-based violence. And so these are really, really important issues, I think, for parents to discuss with young people. Young people are already discussing with each other. I worry about the misinformation that's out there, of course. But I think young people have had a lot of courage in terms of saying, you know, I have the right to my education, including about sexual and reproductive health matters that for so many hundreds of years have been taboo, and for so many hundreds of years have really damaged people's lives out of ignorance.
I mean, these are profound words, and they couldn't have come at a time when I think the issue, the burden of gender-based violence is probably at its peak as we speak. And I think, unfortunately, sadly, the COVID has made everything worse.
Yes. Unfpa was among the first to sound the alarm bell that with COVID, movement restriction, the so-called lockdowns, the quarantines, and the disruption in family life, including the economic disruption when people couldn't get to work and there was a big struggle over even, you know, how to leave the neighborhood and go for your livelihood. The markets were closed. We feared that girls being out of school as well would sadly be seen as an opportunity to take advantage of girls. And up to today, in conversations with UNICEF, that girls don't return to school, which typically happens once they drop out. So COVID really posed big challenges. And here on the African continent, AfriYun, the network of youth who work on sexual and reproductive health, and there are thousands of them, took it upon themselves to build networks for social support. So, for example, many of them went into neighborhoods and helped older people during COVID. So you saw that intergenerational cooperation. It was really beautiful. We also had young sports guys who made sure to stand up and stick up for their sister, their neighbor, the girl next door, who was being harassed or attempts made to disrespect her during this time of COVID. Yet and still, and the statistics are fresh in my mind, in a place like Kenya, the teenage pregnancy rate swooped up by 40% last year.
I'm not surprised.
Right. Latin America, where I come from, same story. And this is on a backdrop where in Nigeria, for example, already 2 out of 5 marriages is girls under the age of 18. So we have a lot of soul searching to do. And again, I am a big believer in giving information to the person who has the rights. If I'm a rights holder, I'm so much more protected if someone tries to harass me or to sexually assault me, if I know that this is wrong, and at whatever age, if I can scream at the top of my lungs and demand for my rights. But you know what? Right now, girls are being told, you be quiet. Girls should be seen and not heard, and all this type of foolishness. Girls have a voice. They're actually very smart, and they have a lot to say, and we should do everything in our power to encourage them to speak. And I think there's nothing like bright sunlight and truth to be able to bring that rights holder her rights to her doorstep. And we see the benefits of this. I'm very excited. I'll be meeting your Minister of Finance during my mission, a female. You've had a lot of gender successes here in Nigeria. And of course, our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, hails from right here. And so I think the time is now, especially with the challenges of girls out of school, COVID, the climate issues. It was Claude Ake who taught me that the African farmer is female. The person you see bent over the hoe is a woman at labor, and we have to do everything to protect her land, to make sure that she can succeed in the market, and also that her reproductive health is looked after. Your health is your wealth. and for women to be exhausted by pregnancy against their choice. Those days are still with us in many of our communities.
Sadly. You know, this is something I could go on talking about for several days.
Me too.
But remembering that I said we will cover just a few more sections, I will at this point in time move on to the next one. But I'm sure this important mandate will also be, in a way, be a part of that discussion and say, these needs are there, which you have so eloquently described. There are variations across the world. In Africa, sometimes from where I sit, I feel as if it's most acute. But also it's there in Latin America, it's there in Asia, and so on and so forth. What is it like as the executive director who feels as passionately as you do about this mandate and who every day works to coordinate activities? So how does UNFPA do it? What is the structure? How does the executive director indeed function to deliver effectively?
Well, you know, it's really, to me, still amazing how much UNFPA accomplishes during the course of a week, a month, a year. And as you know, I stand on the shoulders of my predecessor, the late Professor Babatunde Oshotimehin, who I actually had known from the period when we met here in the early 90s.
Yes.
And who rose to lead this very important organization and to build it to the stage where now we're well over $1 billion organization with staff who really, as you said, and having been among them yourself for many years, are not only passionate, but they're skillful and they're knowledgeable. So the excitement that we bring is helping communities figure out how are we going to do something together. And so for me, every single day, we have set measurable goals. I do have a background in epidemiology, and as many have said, if it's not measured and counted, it might as well not happen.
Absolutely.
So in that sense, UNFPA's strategic plan, which is guided by, and we're extremely fortunate to have her, Jenna Keita, who is our Deputy Executive Director for Programs. And she's fashioning a plan.
She was once a rep here, actually, in Nigeria.
There you go. Nigeria is everywhere. You can't get around it. She was our representative here prior to Ola Muller, who's here now, and really doing fantastic things. So in this era, our goals are clear. Everything we do is based on data, and usually analyzing data, not just in a block, but breaking it down, disaggregating data. What's happening to the disabled person? What's happening to the person who is female? By age, by location, by ethnicity. And also we look at indices of poverty, because no matter where you go, it is the girl who is disadvantaged who's going to be taken advantage of. And this is morally wrong, but it's also something that holds back development of the entire country. Again, we're back to unfulfilled potential of a young person. So we have 3 zeros, and we are working fervently, and we need partners to do it, which is why I'm so delighted to be back talking with you in terms of building partnerships. The first is to ensure that when we say rights and choices, women's ability to access the contraception of their choice can happen where she wants, how she wants, and with the frequency that's required. And why does UNFPA focus on family planning? Because as a population agency, what we've seen everywhere in the world, and the Asian tiger countries are usually the example that's used. In order for a country to develop, women have to be empowered to choose a smaller family size, which they will if they have the opportunity. And why do women even care about this? It's not even because of the burden on the biology of the human body. Women are selfless. I already said that. Yeah. Women understand to compete in this world, I want my child to have good food. Mm-hmm. I want my child to be able to get through school. Hopefully secondary school, because secondary school, again, is a real benefit when we do the analysis. Furthermore, women have seen that for affordability, the shoes on the feet, the uniform, being able to do things with the family that are enjoyable rather than just scraping by, hoping that lightning doesn't strike. We have to budget and plan. You know, it's an era now where women everywhere are clamoring for contraception, again, of their choosing, and there's so many methods now. But it's a bit disappointing that in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America predominantly, we have 200 million women who are still waiting for the ability to express that right, to walk into a clinic on their own and say, this is what I want, this is how I want it. So that first zero of meeting the unmet need for contraceptives is expensive. UNFPA is a leader in this field. It's a huge logistical problem because it means whether it's condoms, injectables, whether it's pills, whether it's IUDs, and again, we want to give women a range of choices, and men for that matter, to act responsibly as well. So now the port is affected by the COVID issues. Certainly economies that donate money are affected by so much that's going on in the world today. But we have laid a path to 2030 for the Sustainable Development Goals, where we will meet the unmet need for contraception. And we're trying very hard to do that in Nigeria right now. Because of donor issues, we've had a little bit of a setback here. And I'm so pleased that government here is predisposed to help the women of the country to fulfill that part of their destiny. And they will be increasing their partnership with UNFPA monetarily as well. So this is excellent news. And again, our team in Nigeria, very skilled, great leadership, and moving forward. And this builds on having been in this country for decades and doing so much together with you. Now, on the second zero, after contraception, we are determined that no woman should die while giving birth.
Absolutely. And
Nkechi, you're well aware that the huge proportion of death in childbirth is completely preventable.
Absolutely.
Why was there no transport to bring the woman to the midwife? Why was there no alarm system to refer her to the cesarean section that she needs? And again, I come back to her understanding her own rights. Why do women not know that you should not be in labor for 12 hours, for 24 hours, for 2 days, that you could die and the newborn could die? This is information that we owe to everyone to understand. And certainly, when I say that a woman dies in childbirth, who am I talking about?
The young girl.
Very often I'm talking about a young girl.
Oh.
Yes. So one of the predictable consequences of pregnancy before the age of 18, and you know, you can be married in many countries before the age of 18 and have 2-3 children by the time you're 20. This is a high risk factor for you to die, and what is going to happen to the rest of your children now? What is going to happen to the family that depends on the central element, which typically is the mom? So in a place like Nigeria, I call attention to harmful traditional practices. And there's so many beautiful, wonderful traditional practices, right?
Absolutely.
Those are the ones we should emphasize. And female genital mutilation needs to become a thing of the past by the year 2030. This contributes to death and childbirth as well. And, you know, when it comes to intimate practices, female genital mutilation is practiced in the anticipation of a girl becoming married one day. So the irony is that rather than preparing her for a good marriage, we're really preparing her for a life of pain and risk. So this needs to be better exposed. I think we have to be very protective of the good aspects of our culture. And there are thousands of them. And we need to leave things that are detrimental behind.
Way behind.
Yes. Now, contraception, working to make sure that women can survive. And, you know, we have made some progress. The death rate in childbirth is half now what it would have been 20 years ago. So when you've conquered a problem, the last mile is always the most difficult. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? And there are a lot of difficulties speaking about issues, for example, unsafe abortion. There are many women, well, again, girls, who resort to unsafe abortion because of shame and stigma of having sex before marriage. It happens, but it's a taboo. And I think as a sage, and as a midwife, as a doctor myself, as so many of us who care about the fate of a young girl, shame is a killer. And we need to prepare her not to be in that predicament. But when something happens, we also have to react in a way that allows a conversation as to how now do we deal with a situation, rather than leaving her in desperation to do something, like unsafe abortion represents. And for the third zero of ending gender-based violence, we've touched on this already. I'm looking for answers. I think I will hear a lot about that. During my trip, I'll be visiting with Chibok girls, for example, and UNFPA has been very supportive with Ministry of Women, Ministry of Justice, trying to assure that anyone who's kidnapped or anyone who's subjected to sexual and gender-based violence can be healed. Part of the healing is physical, medical. That's actually the easier part because the mental burden can be very high. But a lot of victims have told me that one thing that's very healing is to have justice provided. So we're working very well now with the legal system, with the system of customary laws, with so many other avenues to assure that women will be respected, that the rights of the girl will be always, always protected. I believe that the work that we do in Nigeria, soon to be third most populous country in the world, and not, again, necessarily by choice, because the burden of high explosive population growth, even on infrastructure, in a place that floods, even on, the tragedy that we were so sorry to hear about with the building collapse, et cetera, et cetera. The issues of population dynamics and data is something that UNFPA continues to advise. You have excellent statisticians in this country, and we will be working hand in hand on the census once government takes its decision. I believe we're looking towards 2022. And this will also provide young people with information that they need. Who are we? Where are we? And what are our life prospects so we can fulfill our potential?
And what are the indicators of progress?
Yes.
For
we'll
us,
be looking
the young
for this.
people.
Yeah.
I don't know. Recently, I found out that Nigeria, although I'm now moving ahead of myself to talk about specific, but just to say that Nigeria has the 6th highest incidence of suicides in the world. I don't know how many people realize that. And many of the suicide cases amongst young people, largely. Some women, many women, young girls as well. And it's, in a way, it's a direct indication of this huge problem that exists, whether it's, where they're unable to claim their rights, where the society somehow is not providing enough for them, and where the issues of gender-based violence are actually increasing, sadly.
Well, you know, Dr. Nkechi, it's so important to say, especially for your listeners, that there are always times of worry and despair. And if you are worried about your mental state, you should call a hotline, and this will be provided for you, the number, so that you can talk to a counselor. And it's very beneficial. And as they say, this too shall pass. So I always encourage anyone with thoughts of harming themselves to take advantage of the system that you have in Nigeria to help people who are living through times of doubt. That said, for young people everywhere, COVID has been an additional stress. And it's not fair. Life has not been fair to them in this period. So I think there is a lot that we need to do to assure young people that we will be working with them according to their idea of what it is that they think is going to work. And it's been very exciting to see the imagination of a young person, the innovation, blossom with some encouragement. So I think the opportunity to make your own employment is something that's very much on the minds of a lot of the young people that I talk with.
Yeah.
And so earlier you were talking
that,
about
yeah.
economic empowerment.
Yeah.
It's really smart to figure out how to help people have a good livelihood, a decent job. This is part of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's one that connects many of the dots in terms of education, livelihood, climate, peace, and social justice. Young people are fantastic agents of peace in society, but there is also a lot of push towards the opposite. So we also need to assure ourselves that young people can fulfill their aspiration to be agents of development, of peace, of community building.
Absolutely. We'll take a short break, and then when we come back, Natalia will deal with the two small sections that are left.
Very well. Thank you, Nkechi. Good.
We'll be back. Stay with us. Welcome once again to the Sage, and thank you for having been with us. Oh, it's been absolutely fabulous. We've been talking to Natalia, Dr. Natalia Kanem, let me say it properly, the Executive Director of Unfpa, but who is an old friend of mine. And it's been wonderful, it's been rich, but there's still so much to discuss.
Yeah, I wanted you to say the story of how we met.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. But I want you, before I go into that, to just tell us a little about your experience of Nigeria. I almost consider you a Nigerian.
Absolutely, thank you.
And I'm going to give you a little opportunity to talk a little about your life, your work and life in Nigeria, which continues now, of course, even more importantly as Executive Director. And then we'll move on to that very intriguing last part of the discussion.
Well, thanks, Dr. Nkechi. I hail from Panama. Panama is a beautiful country. It has a population of 4 million, in contrast to the 200 million and counting here. And it's the isthmus where the Panama Canal connects the two great oceans, Atlantic and Pacific. In Panama, as a crossroads of the world, we've had people of African descent from the beginning of our existence, and of course the Amerindian indigenous people who are native to those lands. In addition, Europeans and Asians and Arabs and everyone else is in a mix. So it's a very interesting crossroads, much like Nigeria itself, because of your sailing culture and the coastal life that you share in a continuum across the continent. So coming to Nigeria initially as the student of the great Olikoye Ransom Kuti.
Wow.
Was at the time, a very exciting prospect of learning about tropical medicine as his medical student. But now, with the gift of hindsight, you realize that the exposure to some of these ideas and principles of primary care, and Prof was a huge champion as a leading pediatrician around the world, but certainly as one of the great fathers of public health here in Africa, of paying attention to the child under the age of 5. And this increased my understanding that if you, I'm a pediatrician myself, if you want the baby to survive, look to the mother. What happened to her early in her childhood is going to follow her throughout the course of her life.
Absolutely.
And affect her pregnancy, her well-being. And now we know so much about the state of the health of the mother's happiness. All of this contributes to happy, healthy baby as well.
And family.
And family. So coming to Nigeria as a medical student in the heyday, booming economy, you know, up until today, everywhere I go, you meet Nigerians who are leading in their field. And that was certainly the case when I was here at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. I also went up to Ibadan, and I was posted in Ogbomoso, in a rural health posting, where as a student doctor, you had these beautiful interactions with simple people who didn't have a lot. You know, they wanted to come back the next day and bring you 2 eggs or a gift from their garden. But they understood this principle of mutuality, of helping each other. And I think also it motivated me to want to do something about the types of preventable conditions that I was seeing as a young doctor. Tuberculosis, which there's an inoculation for. So if the health system is working, Professor Ransom Kuti always stressed primary care to prevent disease before it leads to all of the complications, right? And so these are principles that I've carried with me. But I have to say, to be here in Nigeria as a young person with music, with the textile, with the cultural elements, the pepper in the food, which just flattened me completely. It was very, very exciting. And many of my cohort in the medical school and in the dental school included Caribbean students who were supported by Nigeria with scholarships. Your Commonwealth links and the generosity of the people here led to this. My Ghanaian colleagues, so many of us are still in touch. We still love each other. We've been able to learn together, and I think to have a real imprint on action. We understood that you don't have to be a big person. You don't have to be a man. You don't have to be somebody with a big name family in order to be able to help in your corner. And this, I think, is really wonderful, because there's no greater pleasure than knowing that you've been able to make a difference, you know, in a bad situation. And so for Nigeria, I think the influence of women like Chief Bisi Ogunleye, who famously led the Country Women Association of Nigeria, rose on the world stage to talk about things like hunger and the woman farmer, and also the ability of leadership, not just at the political level, but in the marketplace. The power of a culture that spans generations of understanding, that the expectation of our ancestors is that we will prosper and live in peace. All of these are things that have been huge guidance for me as I think back to the benefits of Nigeria the first time that I came. I returned as an official of the Ford Foundation. That was extremely exciting. I met people like Dr. Friday Okonofwa, a young obstetric researcher at that time, he was swimming against the current because he was very, very concerned about infertility, the inability to have a child, the condition of being called a barren woman. All of this has huge social stigma, and I was very pleased to be able to fund his early research and also to have the opportunity to discuss with him the high yield things that we're going to do. We can't do everything, so you have to choose. I mentioned that Unfpa has prioritized contraception, ending death in childbirth, and ending gender-based violence. But you also have to think at the community level, what should we prioritize? For me, that means midwives. Midwives save lives. We have to think at the national level, what do we prioritize? Gender equity in policy and then in deed. And of course, globally, there are huge problems, but the United Nations is there to try to overcome this through dialogue. And the dialogue on peace is so crucial for Africa right now. Many, many red flags and danger signs popping up all over the place. And I am looking to young people to be the solution that figures out a way to resolve disputes. Conflicts are a part of life. But picking up weapons and damaging women in the process is never going to be the solution. So Nigeria has, in fact, I think, been a wonderful gift in my life. My son, who grew up here, he's called Mandela, is frequently back. He's a filmmaker, and you know, the dominance of the Nollywood film industry has been amazing. I am so in love with the new generation of Nigerian musicians who are singing about love, who are singing about the pleasure that young people take in each other, and not misogynistic lyrics demeaning women, and et cetera, et cetera. And now that this has gone viral around the world, I think that kind of spirit of caring for each other is a music that also helps to bring peace in our hearts. And that is where peace in the home and peace in the world begins.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm about to move into the last segment, and I'm going to ask you to share with us about, sometimes our viewers find this most captivating. You're an amazing woman. You've achieved so much. But where did it all come from? And before I let you answer and give you time to think about it, let me share, with your kind permission, of course, about how we met. Actually, we met twice.
Yes, we did, it's true.
We met twice, and with your permission, I will share both. The first time was probably almost 20 to 30 years ago, during the period you were based in Nigeria. I was a young lecturer myself then, although a little older than you. And I went to see the regional director of Ford Foundation because I was about to organize an international conference in Nigeria and needed the support of Ford. And I walked into that office and almost stepped back. I saw this lady. All I saw was a lady with dreadlocks.
Ah, yes, that's right. I forgot about the dreadlocks.
Sitting on the chair. This thing that's called culture and so on. I was startled. I couldn't believe it. I had to compose my face as I sat down, you know. And we started talking. 5 minutes into the discussion, I forgot all about dreadlocks. I was just listening to the sheer intelligence, constructive discussion, wonderful questions that were coming out from this lady, and so on and so forth. And by the time I left the office, I kept saying to myself, hey, come, something just happened there. By the time I finished the 1 hour to 30 minutes, 1 hour meeting, I didn't see dreadlocks. All I saw was a beautiful mind that had a wonderful grasp of the situation I came to discuss and so on. Natalia, I'm making a public confession here. You did something to me that day that I have never forgotten. A lesson that I learned and which I think helped to shape my own life. That in the end, in the final analysis, it's not your gender. It's not the color of your skin. It's what's in there and in here that matters. And you see, why I tell the story was, on reflection, it must have taken a great deal of courage for that young lady that you were to have taken on the world. You were born a woman of color. Perhaps coming from small Panama was also, to a certain extent, a greater disadvantage. Despite all those challenges, you showed me a spirit that fought the system. That took on the world and say, well, if it's my hair and my color and my gender that is your problem, that's your problem. It's not mine. I think
story. That's so interesting.
You might not have thought of it that way, but
so
that
true.
is,
yeah.
But that was what it was, because it took courage. It took courage at that time to do it, to do dreadlocks, to sit in the office and say, I'm regional director, whether you like my dreadlocks or not. And then the second time we met was years after. We then went our separate ways. I also joined an international development community. I joined Unfpa. And I think it took us like another 10, 15 years to meet again. And we met in New York.
Yes.
Together now in Unfpa. And she was saying, oh, I worked in Nigeria many years ago, and so on and so forth. I am Natalia Kanem. I said, oh, I used to know a Natalia Kanem in those days in Nigeria. And she was saying, yeah. And she was saying, yes, it's me. I didn't get it. I didn't see any more dreadlocks. I saw, so it didn't. And then finally I said, oh, it was you. Thank you so much for sharing the laughter with me.
So
but seriously,
interesting.
Tell us what drives you. How did you
remember vividly, and I had patients on the ward when I was here as a student, and then coming back as leader of Ford. Well, at first I was program officer, and then Maura McLean, who you may remember, was there as our boss, and then I moved up to become the representative myself. But you have this term in Yoruba, dada. Everywhere I went, people would call me this. Some with great love and affection, and others were a little worried about it. And I think you're right. Institutionally, I've always felt that it was important to have my natural hair. Black women spend a lot of time
many of us thought,
grieving about the state of their hair. And even as a kid, I remember my grandmother would always tease me, run and get the comb. I always kind of saw the beauty in Afro hair. Even today in the airport, I was mentioning to my colleague as we were in Frankfurt coming on to Abuja, there was a woman with massive natural hair, and it was really, really beautiful to me. She was sitting there doing her cell phone things. But as a high official, even of the United Nations, I think it's very important for us to make space for people who feel othered. And so if you're the leader and you're coming to work, dressed very nicely with gorgeous dreadlocks, I might say, it gives permission for other people to do whatever they want.
Absolutely.
It has to be appropriate, but I think we have to also affirm that we are willing to make room in our heads for people who may not appear. This is something that bothers me a lot, because in the UN right now, we're trying to attract new African leaders. Once you retire, we have to replace you, right? And so the incentive to come in has to be genuinely welcoming. We don't want you to turn into someone else when you cross that threshold.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting. I am someone who is willing to challenge. I'm very concerned about justice, and I have no problem being the person in the room who will make the comment to interrupt what I see as damaging behavior. It's not a problem for me. It can be sometimes discomforting. Sometimes people feel insulted when you say, well, you know, you really should not do that in that way. But it's important for them to understand that they're being observed and that everyone is equal and must be treated equally. We'll have a problem here, not just in Nigeria, but I think worldwide, because as you see, women are clamoring for a seat at the table, but now gender is being looked at through a different lens than ever before. So I believe that in order for people to make strides, there is no value in demonizing the other. As African peoples ourselves, I think also, we come with a spirit of generosity, of curiosity, but also I think there is a lot of latitude for better community-based dialogue. This is something that this year I've championed in the humanitarian situations where UNFPA works, and where terrible things can happen, but it's not discussed. Terrible things can happen, and they must be discussed. This is the only way to prevent the next person from being victimized. What I actually thought was great about the story you told, though, was how ideas can spread. Because with your decision to convene an international meeting, you know, there's some people who would have said, well, you're not ready, you haven't done it before, etc. But we all learn. And I think you had a fantastic opportunity, which you grabbed and benefited so many people who were privileged to be in that circle that you built. And in a way, that's kind of what you're still doing in terms of building a community now.
Trying my best.
Yeah, well done. Really, really proud of that. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, look, I would like to say that part of the success of UNFPA is its staff. And in Nigeria, we've been really pushed to think creatively how to work with communities, because you're such a diverse country.
Absolutely.
And geographically challenging country, but very beautiful country as well. And I think there are different types of languages, like we tried to show in Nairobi, where we had a Nigerian textile artist, Yemisi Ajayi, and a gentleman who worked with sculpture from found objects, just to show that when we talk about the continuity of life, of reproductive health, of decisions around the value of women and girls, it's not just the ability to speak nicely in a meeting. It's really the day-to-day life of people. And it is women who weave, it's women who make soap, it's women who are potters, it's women who dye the indigo that is so renowned and beloved all over the world. There's a type of wisdom in somebody who can sit there patiently and make the basket grow and come to life.
Yeah.
And I think these are all metaphors for understanding that women and girls demand their respect, they're owed their respect, and to pledge that we will all make sure that we give them their due. So thank you, Nkechi, for what you've been able to do. Your career in UNFPA is legendary. I think through the service that you gave in United Nations, you literally touched hundreds and thousands of women and girls, millions, really, when we think about the training manuals and the efforts that you did in terms of leading the contraceptive supplies program from its little footsteps to the huge program that it is today. And it's a blessing to have people who care, who are willing to step forward and willing to lead in the way that you have. I think it bolsters my leadership to be surrounded by other such people who are caring, but also determined to see that things change for the better. So congratulations to you, and thank you for inviting me. It's been quite a far-ranging discussion.
Natalia, thank you so much. I'm going to be selfish. Usually I ask my guests to say a few last words, but after that beautiful statement to me, I don't know whether to leave it at that, but I will ask you to just say goodbye to our audience, and what's the last few words to them?
Stay hopeful and stay determined. This is a Nigeria that is a giant, not just in Africa, but in the world. And it's going to take all of us to work in concert to make the world better. So I believe that the world we want, the Africa we want, means that all hands have to be on deck. There is not a single person that can do it on their own. And my appeal always is to listen to the young people who are in your life, invite them to express their opinion, and make sure that, in particular, young women are aware that you're going to be in their corner, you're going to help them, you're going to back them. And I assure you that UNFPA will do our best to do exactly the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank
you. And all the best.
We thank you all. It's been a great show. She's done us a great honor, pearls of wisdom, but also sharing and giving us the opportunity to know that this great organization called UNFPA is in the hands of a very remarkable lady. Natalia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. We'll see you all next week.